Week 7 brought a little bit of movement, a little bit of shaking going on in the NFL power rankings, but a lot of the same familiar faces remain at the top. One or two maybe from Los Angeles. We'll see if those Chargers snuck up anywhere. With the PFF NFL Power Rankings, I'm George Chahrouri, Eric Eager alongside, brought to you, of course, by mybookie.ag. So let's start with 32 through 21. The Giants and the Cardinals and the Bills, they're pretty firmly set at the bottom.
Yeah, and unlike the Cardinals and the Bills, the Giants don't really have a future at the quarterback position unless you squint and look at Kyle Lauletta there.
Don't besmirch Kyle Lauletta's good name.
So yeah, that's the really, the tough thing about the Giants is that every single week you see some of the brilliance there on that roster with Odell Beckham Jr., Saquon Barkley, and they still can't really get over the hump because their quarterback play has been so erratic and so inefficient at times. With Arizona, you at least get this idea that Josh Rosen is a player that's going to have an opportunity in the future. With Buffalo, with Allen out, it's been really kind of an uninspiring couple weeks.
Moving up to 21, but a team that has really moved down throughout the course of the season has been the Jacksonville Jaguars. We talked about this at the beginning of the year. Defense is just not something you can count on, particularly coverage. It's very sporadic from season to season. That has fallen off, and with it has been a lot of the advantages that afforded Blake Bortles what he was able to do last year. So I would make the claim that it is time for them to start tanking, to go to the bottom.
Yep.
Not going to be popular. A lot of people are going to hate that, but I just don't think Leonard Fournette is bringing anything with him that is going to help you win games.
Which is why they got Carlos Hyde. Defense not being as stable as offense is as simple as watching the last few games for the Jaguars. You had Jalen Ramsey, who I think if we had a chance to pick any defensive player in the NFL, we would pick first. And yet when he's matched up with guys like Tyreek Hill, with DeAndre Hopkins, oftentimes it's simply not enough because the league is so slanted towards offense. And so if you depend upon a defense to win you games, you might have some seasons like 2017 where the Jaguars are able to go to the AFC Championship game, but you're going to get a lot more seasons like this where your quarterback deficiencies are so highlighted.
Yeah, so look, if you're the Jags, I think now is the time to say, we do have some talent on this roster, but we're going to be held back by Blake Bortles. It just seems like there's a preponderance of evidence that supports that. So I'd be interested to see what they do going forward. It seems like they're taking the opposite route, thinking that Leonard Fournette is all of a sudden going to make Blake Bortles a better passer. I really think people need to look at that closely and realize that the defense allowed them to play from ahead so much. It really has nothing to do with Leonard Fournette. We know that rushing the ball is more dependent on run blocking anyways. So I think that'd be an interesting team to monitor. Let's go to 20 through 11 now. Moving up from 22 are the Houston Texans after beating the aforementioned Jaguars on the road.
Yeah, so Houston's a team that we've been low on the entire season. Early on they were 0-3, so they seem to sort of back our intuition there. But of late, they've gotten some wins. Some of them have been ugly, like their win, against Buffalo at home. But this one against Jacksonville was very convincing. DeAndre Hopkins is probably, one of the top 5 most valuable, best non-quarterback players in the NFL. He's been elevating while Deshaun Watson's been hurt. I think this team has a shot in a very, very weak division to make the playoffs. It might only be at 8-8, 9-7, but I think that they've exceeded our expectations a little bit.
Looking at that 15 through 11 group and seeing which of these teams can sort of make a push back into the top 10, and I gravitate towards the teams that have great quarterbacks. So if we look at the Aaron Rodgers, we look at the Matt Ryans, we look at the Russell Wilsons, which of those teams would you guess or would you think has the best chance at elevating themselves?
Yeah, I think Green Bay's tough because they have a top 10 most difficult schedule moving forward. So they're starting with the Rams this week. They're just going to have a really difficult time just having sort of easy wins that propel you into that top spot. Atlanta, they've already played 5 home games this year. So again, that's one where I don't necessarily see them as a contender for a playoff spot. Seattle right now would be in the playoffs if the season ended today on our win projections with Russell Wilson and a team that I think is better than most people expect defensively and on the offensive line. I think that's the team that I would look out for.
Yeah, it's not one that I would expected to have said about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I don't know. There are still some huge question marks. There are huge question marks with all these teams, but I think you can make the case that their sort of prospects got a lot better when teams like the Niners kind of fell off.
Very much.
And all of a sudden, they're sitting there like, well, we're the second best team in this division. So who knows? Before we move on to the top 10, I'll tell you a little bit more about mybookie.ag because once you get this information, you want to profit off it, and that's the best place to do it. Even if it's not with football, whether it's hockey or basketball, those seasons are starting up right now, or with the MLB playoffs, mybookie.ag offers all of the different bet types that you could possibly want. They make it easy to place bets, and they make it easy to cash out. So you want to head to mybookie.ag to make every game more enjoyable. You can use promo code PFF to get a $1 match on your first deposit. We use it. We love it. I think you should too. So head to mybookie.ag where you play, you win, you get paid. All right, 10 through 1. Familiar face again up at the top. No one is dethroning the Rams at this point, but there's still some movement here. We see the Philadelphia Eagles really fall back. They were a team that was right at the top for the first couple of weeks, and rightfully so. Now they're down in 10, really on the verge of not making the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, this week in London is a big game. I think for both teams, with Jacksonville and Philly, I think the loser of that game is soundly in a position to start tanking.
A loser goes home match,
perhaps. Yeah. And so, this one, I think Philadelphia has looked really good at times. Against Tennessee, they had a 17-3 lead. They let that one go. They had a 17-0 lead in the fourth quarter against Carolina. They let that one go. Minnesota, again, they just had spurts in that game where they just allowed the other team to run up points against them. So it's been really weird so far because, Carson Wentz has actually played pretty well. He just hasn't gotten a lot of help and been somewhat inconsistent at times. So that one's a tough one. I think looking at this top 10, though, I do think that there is some opportunity for them to move up because beyond 4, it's really just kind of a crapshoot in terms of who's going to be like the 5th, 6th, 7th best teams in the league.
Well, it's worth noting the Chargers won their game by 1 point. Could have lost it if Mike Vrabel's brilliant decision to go for 2 actually ended up capitalizing. They now find themselves in the 5th spot. Let's talk a little bit about how a team wins by 1 point but vaults 5 places in the standings.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more about their fundamentals, right? The fact that, Phillip Rivers has been terrific, not only under pressure, and that's been something that is unstable, but he's been great when clean, right? Defensively, I think that they're rounding into form. Their statistics were a little skewed early on because they played Kansas City and they played the Los Angeles Rams. I think defensively, they're certainly moving in the right direction. And, in terms of projecting them forward, they have a bottom half of the league strength of schedule moving forward. So they're a team that I think probably won't win the AFC West. We have them under 20% to do so, but they'll be a team I think that's squarely in the playoff hunt in the AFC.
Let's talk briefly about the top 2 teams because I thought that the Saints had a chance to move up to the number 1 spot this last week if the Rams struggled against the Niners. The Rams did not struggle against the Niners, but my question remains, given that the Saints, they won that game thanks to a little help from Justin Tucker, but they played really well outside against that Baltimore Ravens defense that probably is the strongest in the league. So do you think the Saints have what it takes to dethrone the Rams? They play each other in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and we had them, we thought that they were, better than the market had them last week, and they ended up winning, as you said, not only because of some luck, but also playing well, coming back from a 10-point deficit. I think that they do indeed. I mean, they play Minnesota this week on the road. I think if they enact some revenge in that game convincingly, I think that they, are playing a team that's better than the team the Rams are playing in Green Bay. I think that, from a quarterback perspective, they're a little bit better, with Breeze versus Goff. And I think defensively, they're sort of moving in the right direction. They were very poor early on, just like they were a season ago, but they seem to be turning it around a little bit. So I think they can certainly, be a team that challenges Los Angeles here moving forward.
What I think is interesting is we talked about how strong the NFC was and sort of how weak the AFC was.
Yeah.
But what's nice here is that if you look at this top 4, the top 4, and maybe correct me if you think I'm wrong, the top 4 seems to be a world ahead of all of the other teams that are out there. And we're setting ourselves up for 2 from the NFC, 2 from the AFC. So we'll say a few prayers that no one gets hurt, because if there is a Kansas City, New England rematch, a New Orleans, Los Angeles Rams rematch, I think everyone would be happy.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our projected win totals, those 4 teams are all projected for over 11 wins, which is difficult to do in a simulation. There are no other teams in the NFL projected for over 10 wins, okay? So there's a huge gap between those top 4 and the bottom 4. And as you said, if we get those 2 games as the conference championship games, the league is in a really good spot, I think.
Yeah, well, with my luck, not going to happen. Until next week, where we'll, of course, update the guys that have fallen off. The top 4 is not changing, but the rest of it we'll talk about next week. Until then, you can head to profootballfocus.com to get all of our good content. Plus, check out the PFF forecast, and of course, go to mybookie.ag.